Redditors who made a lot of money by sheer randomness. What's your story? I bought a waterproof camera back in 2010 and thought it would be cool to try it out at the new water park that just opened. 1 year later the video blew up, making me tons of money monthly. I still make some during the summer months but not much. Now I'm sitting at just over 100 million views. In the 90s I fostered a dog for some friends who were leaving town and left the dog with me. This dog immediately made an impression upon me, and even though I really didn't want a pet at the time, he was such an amazing dog, he convinced me otherwise. He was super smart, half black lab, half pit bull. I called him Wisdom because he was so smart. Fast forward a few years, I used him as a mascot for a recording studio I set up. I registered the domain name wisdom.com. My dog passed away several years later, and I was heartbroken and depressed for many years. I maintained the domain name, even though I didn't really have any projects associated with it. Over the years people made offers on the domain name, but I always passed. The domain was a homage to my long lost best friend. Then in 2000 with the .com boom, there was renewed interest in domains and IPs. I had a few groups bugging me for the domain name and kept increasing their offers. Eventually the numbers got into the life-changing areas of money, and I couldn't ignore them. I originally secured the wisdom.com domain name for nothing. In the early days of the internet, it didn't cost any money to register a domain name. You just had to fill out the right forms. I actually would never have to pay any domain renewal fees if it wasn't for a sysadmin that made changes to the domain and accepted new terms of service that forced me to have to pay renewal fees. Otherwise, the $475,000 I was ultimately offered in cash would have been pure profit. But instead my cost was a few $100s over the year. Still a significant windfall that gave me the opportunity to take that money and create another cool community of wonderful people I continue to be in, or that my little dog, Wisdom, had the ability to bestow such an amazing gift upon me so many years later, and I'm determined to use that gift to help others. I took the money to create a special space that is a makerspace and club to help others. My neighbor died with no friends or family and left everything in her will to us. Everyone always asks if we were great neighbors to her. I'd say no, we were just neighbors and treated her as we would want to be treated and did neighborly duties for her. If it snowed we cleared her driveway without her asking, took care of her cats. If she went to the beach, say hello if we saw her. She was a tough cookie and an alpha female, would be the best way to put it. She hated if I played basketball in the driveway, and when we were cleaning out her garage, after she died we found 3 of my old basketballs. But she was also the type of person, if she wanted an apple pie she would bake an apple pie, and take a slice, and bring the rest over to us. My wife's aunt died. She had been institutionalized her whole life and neither of us had ever even met her. We kind of forgot about it for a few months until my wife's uncle emailed her and said she was going to be getting some money. We were like, oh, okay, that's kinda weird, but not complaining. Then my wife got a phone call from the uncle one evening. I heard a lot of ums, okays, and geez, wows. Turned out we were getting over $300,000. We were both grinding away making $15 an hour and barely making rent every month, and then boom, out of nowhere. That ended up being the difference between having a house and not having a house, being able to start a family and not being able to start a family, and having a retirement fund vs just hoping not to get evicted every month. I briefly worked with a guy who was in his late 20s, ex-military. When he got out, a friend of his he served with told him to buy Bitcoin. He bought several thousand worth when it was nothing and forgot about it. When it first started spiking and getting attention on the news, he started looking for the drive because he thought he had some. He didn't, he had a lot of it. Sold well before the peak. Dude made millions. He had an $800,000 house, multiple high-end cars, and came to work a manual labor job because he was bored. Needless to say, he didn't stay long and all he did was show off his money and clock hours not actually working. Not money, but I was gifted a brand new $1,200 laptop for free once, just because I posted about needing a new one on a forum. I found $3,600 in a food taquilla box in the middle of a giant field. I live in a rich area and lot of drug deals happen, so it's possible I stole multiple thousands of dollars from a drug dealer on accident. I used to play Minesweeper a lot. Some website showed up where you could play in little tournaments. I started with $20 and made over $1,000. Edit. I don't remember the name of the website. This was like 20 years ago. I'm sure it's long gone. I won $5,000 playing bingo on a cruise. I have only been on one cruise, and it was the only time I have played bingo in my life. I have retired from both. Worked a job for a long time. Got hurt on the job. They, instead of helping me, terminated me. Got a lawyer. A year later got $260K for the whole fiasco. Not sure if this counts, but that's my story. Playing blackjack while drunk in Reno. I had $300 to waste at the $5 table, got lots of free watered down drinks while I was playing, so I wasn't paying attention. I have a rule: 2 piles, one of cash I can waste and another of money I won. I was there for about 3 hours before I realized I wasn't out of betting money and the dealer had changed 4 times. $4K at that table. Paid for the trip and a bit left over. I haven't been to a casino since, but I doubt I'd have that kind of luck again. I started an Amazon private label business on a whim in 2015. I made about 25% of the sale in profit after product, shipping, and advertising costs. Sales doubled every month for 6 months: June $4K, July $8K, August $18K, September $40K, October $84K, November $175K, December $362K. I didn't know what to do. I quit my job in January to focus on growing the business, but my time was spent mostly trying to fend off competition copying my listing and posting fraudulent reviews, and then lowering my price in the race to the bottom. It went well for a few years, but I never made as much as I made that first December. Lesson learned: arbitrage isn't a long-term business. When I was 17, about to turn 18, my mom told me to open a bank account because I was going to get around $500 to $600 from my dad. Opened the bank account, signed the papers she needed me to, and got a whopping $15,400 deposited into my bank at 18 years old. 2 years ago, 22 at this point, come to find out he gets a huge settlement for a car accident, I think, and get another $15K disbursed over 5 years. IDK if it was back child support or what, but I was really blessed. My previous employer eliminated my position, a whole department actually. I got a severance of 1 week/year, which worked out to be 22 weeks of salary. Not only that, I got paid a bonus to stay on for the last 3 months. After that was over, I got a job with a competitor company making the exact same salary and doing mostly the same job. Started the very next Monday. I actually even like working for the new company better. I don't know how random that really was, but it sure felt like a real fortunate way to lose a job. I had an aunt that was basically excommunicated from my family for reasons that still are unclear to me. I was super young when the falling out happened, 4 or 5. She was married to some super old guy who was oil wealthy and inherited his fortune when he passed. When I was 23 she passed, and crazily enough I was her favorite. She liked me, and in her letter left to me, I was the son she never had. I remember the way she used to play hide and seek with me, but nothing else. It makes me sad that she was kicked out of the family, and she seemed to have really though a lot of young me. She left me too. $4 million. I've always in the back of my mind tried to make her proud of me, cause she was the cool hide and seek aunt I never really knew. The summer after my freshman year in college, I was walking my little 20-pound dog on a street near my house. A neighbor lady was walking her 2 dogs who were a husky and some other similar sized dog. The husky attacked my dog, and in the process I got some teeth marks on my wrist. Since the neighbor's dog started it, and the owner obviously couldn't control it, I wanted them to pay the vet fees for my dog, which was under $500. The guy ended up being a dick about it, and my roommate's dad was a lawyer, so about a year and a half later I ended up with about $20K. I was celebrating my 20th birthday. Decided to go to the nice casino an hour away from campus with my then boyfriend. We played bingo, because that's what I could afford, and it occupied some time. We lost. I called my dad. He loves casinos when he has the money to go. He told me to play 3-card poker. I had watched him play before, but I didn't know how, and was on my last $20 to my name. He told me that would be enough for a hand or two and just give it a shot. The dealer would explain the rules. So I sat at the table by myself. I won. The dealer was really excited for me, but I was pretty clueless. I had a straight flush. Then I just kept winning. People would take the seat in front of me. They would lose. I'd win. Didn't matter. Got 2 more straight flushes that night and lots of other good hands. I kept betting the minimum. Wish I was putting down more. I turned $20 into $3K that night. My dad didn't believe me. My grandma decided to try a slot machine once as a joke and won $300 first try. My friend's father was gifted an oil pencil drawing in the late 70s. His family always assumed it was pretty much worthless, and I always joked that it looked like my friend had drawn it as a child. This stilly angry stick figure drawing ended up being an unsigned piece of art by Jean-Michel Basquiat. His family did some digging and eventually had it authenticated by the JMB estate before selling it at Christie's auction house for an amazing sum of money. I was absolutely blown away when I learned this. My friend and his family were far from wealthy, so to realize they had this unknown treasure just sitting out in the living room for so many years was mind-blowing. I once got a message from Reddit admin. It asked if I wanted to do some contract work in my free time. Over the course of a few months, I made like $5,000 for browsing subreddits and categorizing them by topic and age rating. I didn't get to pick the subreddits I wanted to view though. They'd send me a list of a few hundred subreddits, and I'd have to spend about 10 to 15 minutes on each sub. I'd check for certain things, fill out a Google Sheets form, and move on to the next sub. When I finished a full list, I'd email them to get a new one. It was a pretty sweet gig. I was a substitute teacher and a tutor at the time, so anytime a kid or a teacher cancelled on me, I'd do my Reddit thing. Plus, it was an easy job to do while I was homesick or waiting for the repair guy to come to my house. Because I had no set hours, I just worked whenever I felt like it. I had a coworker who had bought a new car, and within a week somebody crashed into him, and the car was totaled. He ended up getting a little more from their insurance than he paid for the car, and moved on. A year later, he got a letter from the other guy's insurance company saying that they had audited their books and found that they owed him money. They sent him a check for $16,000 to pay for the damage to the car they had already totaled. It wasn't a lot, but when Bitcoin started getting crazy around $9K a couple years ago, I put a few hundred in. Watched it climb all the way to 18K. I figured people were going to sell at 20K because of reasons. My only experience in economics, currency, or commodity trading was effectively RuneScape, so I sold literally right at the under 20K. It was a nice 100% return in about 2 weeks, so I was happy to get out and watch it fall right back to where I bought in a few weeks later. Sometimes I wonder how things would have turned out if I bet a lot more than a few $100, but oh well. I was 10 years old. Me and my 2 friends found a paper bag in a shopping cart outside the local grocery. It was stuffed with money. We counted it, and it was just over $600. We split it 3 ways and went home. One of my friends later crumbled under the pressure and told their moms, who told our moms. We had to return it. I only spent like $10. Turns out it belonged to one of the suppliers to the grocery, who accidentally left it in his cart on the way out. Not a ton of money, but for a 10-year-old kid, man, we were proper rich for a minute. I was in a car accident when I was 5. About $250,000 in medical bills. My parents' insurance company and my grandfather, who is a lawyer, went after the other dude's insurance company. We also got awarded punitive damages to the tune of 3:1 of medical bills. Because it's a court-ordered settlement in the particular state, I don't pay taxes on it. I'm now 23. I have gotten a payment every year now, since I was 18. The actual value when I was 18 was about $560,000. I have paid for my college and will have the remainder of the money by the time I'm 27. I can effectively contribute nothing to my retirement and I will likely retire a millionaire. At the time it was terrible. I was near death for about 18 hours and in surgery, but now I'm perfectly healthy and have only minor scarring on my face. All told, I count myself very fortunate for not only surviving, but also having a nice nest egg. My great aunt and godmother was a lesbian. Her partner, my auntie Kitty, had been with her since the 1950s when my godmother moved to New York City to work for as a magazine photographer. Auntie Kitty was disowned by her family when it came out she was with a woman. My godmother died when I was 12 and left my auntie Kitty everything in her will, which made things strained with my dad's family, though my dad and one of his brothers still talked to her. I moved to New York at 18 for school, and, knowing no one else in the city, we became close. She was thrilled that I wanted to have a relationship with her and spend time with her, and didn't hesitate to think of her as my aunt, even though she technically wasn't. She was legit the greatest, and we spent holidays together, and she would come to things I worked on, and I knew all her friends and she knew mine. I basically spent a decade with her, being like another grandmother to me. As she got older, she'd repeatedly remind me I was the executor of her will, that I was to follow it to a T, and none of her family was to get anything. I got the bulk, my dad and uncle got some, and my sister and my nieces a little. I knew the woman had money. She had a vacation home in the Carolinas and a brownstone in Nick, but since they were bought in the 70s, I figured outside of real estate, there wasn't much. I was very wrong, and inherited enough that potentially I wouldn't have to work ever again if I didn't feel like it. When Google first came out, I thought it was far and away superior to the search engines of their time. Much more efficient interface. When their IPO came out, I got some not fast money, but I lucked in to get hired by our employee-owned business. You earn 25% of your annual salary in stock. I have 6 figures worth. I hope to afford a decent retirement. I was the victim of housing discrimination and the morons put it in writing. They literally sent me an email explaining they wouldn't rent to me because of illegal discrimination reason. Had they just not sent the email, they would have been fine. Nobody would have known they'd rejected my application for a bad reason. It's okay to reject applications for a wide variety of reasons. If they'd chosen a fake one, or even given no explanation at all, they wouldn't have found themselves in legal trouble. I made a complaint to my state and the state assigned a free lawyer to handle it. I didn't even know they'd do that. Anyway, the people kept lying and saying I was making shit up. They insulted my character in a wide variety of ways that went way beyond the issue at hand. Think stuff like claiming I was faking, reason they discriminated in the first place. So how could they discriminate against something I was faking? It was just ridiculous. In the end, I wound up with a decent sized check. Again, when I reported them, I thought I'd never learn the result of what the state would decide to do. I was just reporting a broken law. But the best part was that the lawyer asked me if I wanted them to have to take an anti-discrimination class because, if I did, the state would include that in the punitive measures. I did. The class was 2 hours away from them in the constant traffic of our area, and I liked imagining them having to sit there in some ugly depressing room while being educated about why they were shitty people and needed to stop being shitty. My ex-husband was a bad dude. He currently owes me over $26k in back child support. When we were together, all of the bills were in my name. He left me for another woman 3 weeks after I gave birth to our second child and defaulted on all of our bills. Both our cars got repoed, and I ended up filing bankruptcy 2 years later. Last year I got a notice in the mail from the lender of one of the 2 repoed cars. Apparently there was a class action lawsuit against them for hidden fees, and since the cars were in my name, I was getting a refund of a few $1,000s. I was able to use the money to help move out of my mum's place. Normal Reddit reply of not me, but my friend's dad's friend. He decided to open an ice business. Hey, everyone need ice. He bought an old warehouse in the ghetto because it was cheap. Government decided to redo the on-ramps to the bridge and needed to buy like 1/3 of his parking lot, maybe say 20 parking spots worth. He didn't care. He had a staff of like 4, never used more than that. I never heard exact numbers, but I did hear he got more for those spots than he paid for the property. I started live streaming on Twitch a few years back when I was 15. I unexpectedly blew up really quickly and amassed a following in only about 2 months of streaming. I made over $2,000, which was a lot for a 15-year-old. Haha. I loaned a friend $12k to buy inventory to sell flea and tick meds for pets online in the early 2000s. He did really well and went on to make tons of money doing it. He paid me back in like 6 months and sent me checks for $1k a month as a thank you for going on 15 years now. I made him stop recently because I don't need it. It's a pain to account for on my taxes and he's paid me like 10x back for the loan lol. I quit a job at a startup that was a mess and I just wanted to do something relaxing. So I took some time of cleaning up an old algorithm I wrote 10 years ago. I told a friend of mine who told some industry people about it. They contacted me and I got invited to talk about it at a conference, and then large companies started getting in touch. So far I have signed one 7-figure deal to license it. It's not random, but it feels very random. I'm making more in interest now than I ever have earned holding down a job. The world is not fair. My now husband's boss bet the table at the company Christmas party that nobody could tell him what the name of the restaurant meant in English. The silly ass did this at an Italian restaurant. I speak some French and guessed it instantly. Boss man took 7 months to pay up on a $100 bet to a teenage girl. Edit. The restaurant was called Venive, which means come/go. I agreed to teach a class to a school district, a new version of Office and Internet Explorer. IE was new at the time. It was a voluntary class. I got paid a flat rate, then I got a per head bonus and a bonus for performance rating. The students rated me on what they learned. Made almost 10k in 3 weeks. Basically showing people keyboard shortcuts and walking them through a slideshow I made the weekend before the first class. It was originally 2 weeks, but there were so many people that signed up after that first week it got extended. The beau came back and bought the slideshow for about $750 and had someone on staff teach the class after that. I was a male escort for about 7ish years. Not a hooker, specifically an escort. I would go with people, usually women, but sometimes men, and would pretend to be their perfect boyfriend/partner in front of friends and family/co-workers. It started out very much as an accident, but ended up making me a ton of money. I recently retired and started focusing on going to school cause I can't do escorting my whole life, and nor did I want, because I really dislike people, and it was honestly a chore. Most of my clients were 1% percenters, which is the reason I made so much money. I did pay taxes on it before anyone asks. I got a random message from a friend who I hadn't seen since kindergarten that offered me $65 for each pic of my braces I sent. I have no idea what the pics were used for, and we haven't talked since. My last employer before I retired was matching 25% of whatever I contributed to my 401k. I maximumed out that bitch every year, even when it got to be over 30% of my salary. Most of my workmates were contributing like 3-5%, and I couldn't for the life of me convince them that 25% plus whatever appreciation was the best deal they'd ever see in their lives. I retired at age 62 and my wife retired soon after at age 55. Our advisor predicts a 99% chance that we'll be able to maintain our very comfortable current lifestyle for the rest of our lives, even if my wife lives to 100. My former workmates, probably not so much. Dunno if it's really sheer random. My partner passed away suddenly and unexpectedly from a massive seizure. Had seizures before, but nothing that would indicate he'd die from one, and he hadn't even turned 40. About 3 months later, I find he had a life insurance policy I didn't know about, and made me primary beneficiary. It gave me enough to buy a house, donate to a few causes he cared about, and still have a nest egg to start a real retirement savings off of. I miss him every day. But I guess his last act of love was setting me up for the future, even without him being there. Got adopted by the two best people in the world when I was 4 months old. They did everything they could to raise me and set me on the right path. I have a pretty amazing life. Great job, fantastic wife, comfortable life, great friends. Pretty much owe everything to a random event where I was the kid who got paired with my parents. Side note, I recently found my birth family and discovered I have an older brother who was not put up for adoption. To see his life and what he had to endure is very hard for me. I hit the jackpot and I'm thankful every day. My wife and I got some stock options when the part of the company we worked for spun off from a much larger corporation. They weren't worth much when we got them. This was the 90s, though, and every tech stock was going up. Eventually, we jokingly decided that we'd sell when the stock price got high enough to pay off the house after we paid the taxes. Well, one day, right before we were about to leave on vacation, it got there. We briefly thought about holding out for more, but nope, we cashed out and left. In the 2 weeks we were gone, the stock price surged up and then crashed, never to see those levels again. In fact, the stock crashed below $1. The company did a 10:1 reverse split. I think they did this twice. It eventually went below $1 again, and the stock was delisted. Funny thing is that a lot of our friends told us we were crazy to sell. One friend even exercised his options when we did, but put the proceeds into the stock market without having saved any money aside for taxes. We did really well on the deal, but it was a combination of luck and our combined conservative fiscal nature. I cut my elder neighbor's yard growing up and helped him with random things around the house. He passed away while I was in college. Came home one weekend and I have a letter in the mail. It was from my old neighbor's attorney advising me he left me his house, money and 2 cars. I was fairly close with the guy, but never knew he had no family at all. Immediately sold the cars, I rent the house out, and I invested 50% of the money. When I was younger, a friend of my brother's asked me to buy him beer. He said he would throw me a couple bucks for my time, so I said sure. I meet up with his at the store, and he hands me a $20 gold coin. With my coin knowledge being very low, something about the coin made me curious. I bought the beer with my own money. He threw me $10 and we were all good. When I got home I went online to see the value of the coin. Low end was around $1,000. I took the coin to a collector, who basically gave me the value in gold weight at the time, about $1,250. 00. Easiest $1,260 I've ever made. Found $50 on the ground once. I built a motorcycle back in 2011. Pretty well all the parts on it I built. Took it to a few rallies, few shows. Made its way around the internet, some magazines. Had a ton of people ask if I sold this part or that part. So I started in my garage. Sold right about 10,000 parts out of there over the span of 2 years. Bought a shop, more equipment, started automating my processes. Friend that owns a business that supplies stuff to practically every nuclear plant in the world pops in one day, asks me to design a connector for a surveillance system they sell. Took a day, had the prototype done. Cut out round about 20 minutes on each individual camera installation, and required no tools. They sold a fuck ton of those. Then jumped into radiation shielding. Big fun money in that. It's been nearly 10 years now. Sell thousands upon thousands of bike parts that I designed and build every year. Travel to motorcycle events all over. Generally have a blast. I'm 31. Pretty well have the financial freedom to go do whatever I want. Wasn't a lot, but my best friend and I went to Jack in the Box for my 17th birthday. We spent like 10 to 15 bucks maximum. Then when we came out there were two $10 bills in the grass outside. We each took one. That was a nice birthday. Forgot I had 11 something bitcoins from back in the day left over from buying pizza. Tried to set up a new account to invest in Bitcoin since I'd used it before and saw I already had an account. Logged in and wow. Sold it all and made like $7k. Imagine the feeling knowing it would eventually reach $20k per coin. I started work as its support earning around 2k to 3k per month. My company turnover is around 10%, which is out of PPL, since my company is quite big. My company tried to lower the turnover by promoting PPL. After 5 years I'm now assistant manager earning 7k monthly just by not quitting. I worked at a local restaurant job as a line cook for about 1 month, and we were paid bi-weekly. After a month, the general manager laid me and one other guy off because they weren't making enough money to pay us, and we were the newest people on the totem pole. I'm 100% positive I received 2 paychecks. For whatever reason, about 2 years later, I received a letter from the headquarters of the company for a potential check of $1,000, and they apologized for not paying me. Again, I swear I got all of my money, but since I have a common first and last name, I think they got me confused with someone. Being the honest person I am, I called the headquarters and gave my social security number, but they insisted I was the right person. I have no idea how it happened. I still think the entire thing was an error, but I received an approximate $1,000 paycheck. Back in the mid 1990s, when I lived in Nick, the musical Rent was really popular, but they hadn't yet published the sheet music for it. I got hired by this dude who wanted to put on a performance of Rent. He had a bootleg cassette of the show and offered to pay me $50 per song to create lead sheets. I have a really strong ear, so it was not time consuming. It wasn't a lot of money, but for a struggling college student it was great, and was definitely the most random way I ever made money. I've been investing lately and doing a lot of day trading, and on one of the trading subreddits there was this massive hype about this stock and how it was about to explode, and people were suggesting everyone go all in. Since I'm crazy, I put 10k at 2.05 and exited at 11.40 and suddenly became $50k richer. I don't think I will ever get that lucky again, so that was the first and the last time I make a huge life decision based on Reddit. Not me, but a guy I know, bit of hippie dude, lazy, but makes art miniatures now, super high detail, really good work. But essentially him being lazy, yes he is just lazy, it was not intentional, has made demand exceed supply drastically. So he sells like 2 a year, and that's enough to live off. When things like kid's wedding pops up he makes one and trades it for whole wedding. I was on a business trip that passed through Lake Tahoe. 3 people in 1 hotel room, so I went down to the casino to get some space. Couldn't find a blackjack table to lose my $100 at, so I sat down at a Wheel of Fortune slot machine instead. 10 minutes later, I'm absent-mindedly pressing the spin maximum bet and hit the progressive jackpot. $1. 1 million. It's the sort of thing you assume never happens, but it did. Took a lump payment of $690k, which after I pay taxes next week will end up being about $390k. I quickly got a financial advisor, bought my car, now own a couple investment properties, and bought my now wife a ring. Everything else is quite literally the exact same, except I have an epic story to tell to strangers on Reddit. Okay, this isn't a lot of money, but it's an alright story. I was driving through Nevada all day and stopped in Vegas for my first time ever, and I decided to stay on the strip for a night. I was checking into a room and was nice to the desk clerk, and she upgraded me to a suite on one of the top floors in the hotel. It was huge. There were probably like 7 couches and even more TVs and a kitchen and a sunken tub. It was cool. I wandered the strip and didn't gamble, but had a nice time. Before I left the next morning I was like, I'm in Vegas, I gotta at least say I gambled. So I bet $20 playing blackjack and won, and I kept betting what I won until I was up to about $500 and I decided to quit while I was ahead. It was the luckiest I've ever been, I think. I was looking for a new friend online, got a sugar daddy. He just mails me a check once every 3 months of a few thousand. After he heard I was possibly gonna have to put my cat down cause I couldn't afford the surgery. I sent him pictures of my cat as a thank you and to let him know I got the check. Don't cash them though, I feel weird doing it. Did cash the first one to save my cat. I got into a car accident on my way home from dropping my son off to his mom. I'm grateful that that's when it happened and not while he was in the car. Dude in a company truck blew a stop sign and creamed the shit out of me, breaking my arm and giving me a concussion. Well, a few months later, after I had almost entirely healed, I got a fat ass check for 70 grand. I made a reaction gif and posted it on Inga/Forget. I got a message randomly months later asking if I had made it because they wanted to license it. It ended up being used in a Nike commercial, and they paid me pretty handsomely for something I did on a whim. One of the smartest people I know convinced me to buy a Bitcoin miner in 2013. I mined a few before the power bills appeared to be not worth the money. Then Bitcoin started going crazy in late 2017, and I looked into trading. I saw a one-liner on Reddit somewhere that said something like XRB about to explode. I was able to buy around 25k XRB, now Nano. In a few weeks I was a millionaire. XRB was only sold at KuCoin I think and BitGrail. I chose the latter. I didn't cash out due to greed. BitGrail went belly up and now I'm in some international lawsuit that will never pay out I'm sure. I now understand why people jumped off buildings in 1929. 2018 was a tough year, but I got through it. Bitcoin. I didn't know what it was, but someone traded me Bitcoin for real money as they were in need. I considered it a donation and didn't care. Until it became valuable. I decided land and a home, and not needing to work again was worth more and that's that. I still work, because I enjoy the learning of what I do, but I'm not hindered by playing the game of just nodding to superiors when they suggest doing dumb things, so that's another perk. After my marriage ended I ended up with the kids and they would occasionally see their mom, but came lived with me. I hadn't done my taxes in years, but they owed me money so didn't really worry about it. Finally decided to do my taxes which gave me a couple grand which was nice. But what happened next was unexpected. Since I did my taxes I was finally eligible to get my child tax. Once I got in touch with the government regarding child tax they said that after mine and my wife's bank account had closed down the payments stopped because they didn't know where to send the money. After some documents back and forth they said all good and I should eventually start getting child tax payments again. So some time goes by and I'm really broke and still not working full time and I go to 7-Eleven to get my dad $20 for gas I borrowed off him. The bank machine spits out a receipt and I think it must be the guy before me, but the time and date are from when I used the machine. To much surprise I had gotten back pay for all the missed child tax over almost 2 years from right after my marriage ended. With the number of kids I have and all those months missed I about crapped myself when I realized I had over $20,000 deposited in my account overnight. The amount of stress that left my body is hard to describe. The happy ending to the story is my kids are healthy. I have a good working relationship with their mom, who now sees them equally, and I split the child tax with her equally, so the kids have a good quality of life at both houses. Bought a condo at the right time. 3 years later it's up in value by $122,000. I'm moving out of the city soon and back to my hometown, which has lower priced homes. I took out $100 from an ATM and 5 bills came out. 4 20s and 100. Receipt showed $100 withdrawn. I graduated in 1990 with an advertising related degree that was suddenly worthless due to desktop computers showing up in businesses everywhere. Not knowing what to do, I picked up some programming books and started playing around with code. I heard about hypertext markup language and played around with it, and by 93 I was coding sites for companies around the US on CompuServe and AOL, and I was in high demand. The portfolio I built up there landed me a job running a high-profile website by 97, and that income paid for my grad school program, so I could go back to doing what I love, teaching. My retirement is set, my house is practically paid for, and I will do what I love until the day I retire. I'm not filthy rich, just immensely happy with the random way it all worked out. Assaulted by my teacher as a child. Made $115,000 in a lawsuit. Not worth it, but glad to have the cushion. I was maybe 20 years old and bought stuff at auctions and resold it full time, working for myself. One of the other regular auction attendees told me he found some boards and a pallet he bought and wondered if I wanted them. I looked at them, and they were new Cisco boards, but this was over 20 years ago, so smartphones weren't a thing, and I had no idea what they were worth. I offered him $50, and he was very happy. I ended up selling those boards for $18,000. No joke. I split the sale between two different resellers, because I was uncomfortable selling them all to one company.